Going live, and you are live.
And we are live.
Hi there.
Live.
Hello.
Did we switch sides again?
We
Yes.
did. Yes,
It's very strange.
it's whoever jumps on
We're
first.
gonna throw everyone off.
It's okay. It's good to mix it up a bit.
Yeah. Whoever
There-
click add to stream.
Everybody
first
change
gets
your
on-
name.
on that side.
We could do that. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you can do that in real time. But
It's like a pastor shell game. Put little cups over top of the screen.
hi, everyone's piling on in. Come
Yeah.
on in. It's the end of June. It's really hot out.
Very. It's definitely an air conditioned or submerged in a pool kind of day.
Yes, and I hope some
Well,
do that.
On.
Yes.
Don't be anonymous, quiet strangers. Jump in the comments and say, "Hey,
Tell us where you are or who you are. You don't need to tell us where you are. Tell us who you are.
And
We're
how
not going
you
to
are.
stalk you.
Hello, Clarie. Hello, Fiddlers. Hello,
Hello,
Pratik and Lexi. All right.
Hi, Ann.
Man.
hi, everyone."
So you get the shout outs when you jump in quick.
Like that. So happy to see us.
So happy.
Not
We
just
could
happy, so happy.
sing you a song. All right. So first of all, announcements. We mentioned this last week. Hello, Kennedys. Hello, Troy. Hello, David. That this is the end of June, and we are going to do something probably many of you are doing in some way, shape, or form, and that is this will be the last at 9 until we come back in September. So after Labor Day, we'll be back. I promise you, we'll be back. But yes, welcome to at 9. That's where you are. Like, why am I watching them on the internet? Well, that's who we are. But we're going to take just a little break. There's some vacations, a missions trip, all sorts of summary things that are going to be happening between now and the fall. And yeah, boo, I will miss it too. This has been actually turned into a real highlight. It'll be exciting though to be back when we come back in the fall. But we're just taking a few weeks off, and we'll be back with more
Fresh ideas in September.
fresh ideas, probably new haircuts, exciting, maybe a song. I don't know, but just so you're aware of that,
A little
A
tanner.
song.
we hope you all have a great summer too, and you get to this summer, unlike last summer, maybe do some things that are a little more normal. Embrace the rhythm of rest a little bit,
Yeah.
and go sit on a beach somewhere if you're into that.
Mhm.
But as we kind of close this out on a kind of an interesting note, but we've really been on this journey through all of the facets and parts of conflict. And like I've said many times here in recap, like conflict is something we all experience, we all end up having to do. Most of us aren't especially good at it because we don't have any skills or any tools that we bring to it before we actually have to go into it. And so it's like, trying to play in the World Series without ever having played baseball before, having to step onto a stage and play a musical instrument you've never practiced. It's probably not going to go well. And that is the same with this. And so what we've been trying to do is just really define what are some tools that we can learn, that we can talk about before we actually have to use them, so that when we enter into these things in our relationships, and if you have relationships with other people, and both sides are actually thinking and being individuals, you will have conflict. It is inevitable. It's part of life. And so instead of conflict having to be bad, hello, Lisa.
Felicia's on too. Just putting the shout out before you keep going.
All the shout outs. Hi, Felicia. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. But so it's really trying to make conflict as restorative as possible. Meaning, in a healthy relationship, you'll have conflict. Hopefully that conflict actually can lead somewhere good and somewhere better, where there's a better understanding of each other, and you are able to move through hard things together. If you've had a friend for a long time, or you've been married or been in a relationship for a long time, you know that conflict, if done well, can make your relationship stronger.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it can make it stronger, because now it actually has been tested. It's been tried, and it's been found to have substance to it. But there are times, and this is kind of where we started last week, where conflict doesn't go well. And there's a person who doesn't want to forgive, or they don't want to reconcile, and they're actually damaging or toxic, And what we talked about is forgiveness is what you do for you. It's what you do to set yourself free and release the other person. Reconciliation is when you actually try to restore the relationship. Forgiveness you can do by yourself. Reconciliation requires both of you. You can't do the other person's part for them. It just doesn't work. And so inevitably the question comes up then, what do you do when there is no reconciliation and there's still proximity? And that brings us to our exciting title tonight, which is Boundaries Part 2. This is a lot of this material is adapted from Henry Cloud. He's a Christian psychologist, but a very helpful thinker when it comes to sitting at the kind of the intersection of faith and relationships and practice. And so I really appreciate a lot of his material. But what we talked about last week was that a boundary, and Bruce, who is here, is a civil engineer, so he knows this stuff. It's like a property line. If you bought your house, at some point probably a surveyor came out or they gave you a survey, and it shows you exactly where your property ends and your neighbor's property begins. And really what it is it's just trying to separate what is ours to be responsible for and what is the other person's to be responsible for. Because as most of us know, in conflict, that gets really messy because there's people who don't take responsibility. There's people who try to take too much responsibility. And so really a boundary is just, it's setting those lines straight, and it's actually, it's protective. But it has the ability, and this is what a lot of people miss with boundaries, it has the ability to be a tool for restoration because it stops you from taking responsibility for things that aren't yours. And it requires the other person to face the possibility of what they would be responsible for. The analogy I gave last week was that, like, my neighbor, and I have a great relationship with my neighbor, but if his plumbing failed and his pipe started leaking, it is totally fine for me to go over there and help him. But I'm at the end of and I've actually done that. But at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for his pipes. I'm not responsible for his property. He is. If he starts blaming me for his pipes, then there's something that's happened. But that happens a lot in our relationships. And so boundaries become necessary when there's another person who won't take responsibility for their stuff and they expect you to become emotionally responsible for them. Or in the conflict, there's always two parties, and there's usually always two sets of responsibility in any conflict, even if it's like 99% and 1. And one of the things we talked about was that one of the best things you can do as a reconciler is figure out what your part is, figure out what your percent is, figure out what you legitimately can take ownership of. But this is where the other person won't take their responsibility, or they try to come onto your property and take control of something that's yours. They try to manipulate your feelings or perspective. They dismiss the fact that you're an equal party in the relationship. That's very often manipulation or gaslighting. And so really, boundaries, they're protective and they're clarifying. We had a verse we kind of based a lot of this on, and there's a lot of great single line verses in the Old Testament book of Proverbs. A lot of it was written by King Solomon. And he very famously in Proverbs chapter 4, he said, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And what that means is your heart, in the ancient Hebrew conception of your personhood, it was all that made you you. It was your personality, it was your thoughts, it was your feelings, it was your passions, it was all these things. And so it's important to guard that because it's really what God has given you that makes you unique. And so really, this is all about how do we protect that? That's really what boundaries become about. Last week, we looked at the fact, and I'm going quick because this is all sort of review. I feel like I'm back in college again, teaching college, because I would do that every week. And some of you are like, stop. But every good relationship has two components. It has grace and it has truth. And this really, the idea of this is we know Jesus came and he was full of grace and truth. It says that in the Gospel of John in chapter 1. And we all love grace and we need it. And we get to receive it from our best relationships, and we get to give it, which is none of us are perfect. We all have bad days and we all have shortcomings. And grace is when the other person loves you, and in spite of those things, they say, I know you've got that issue, but I love you anyway. And this is not going to be something that it affects our relationship. And Jesus modeled that to people, and it's great when we model it. But any good relationship has grace flowing in both directions. People give it and they receive it. But there's this other thing that's absolutely crucial, and this is something I think that gets missed a lot, Andy and Daria, when it comes to really our culture's perception of relationships, and that's truth. And really, I don't know. I know I'm shorthanding it a little bit, but there's this idea that, you just love is like this feeling thing, but any good relationship is based on an objective reality at some point. Like you, Andy, and you, Daria, you are married to each other, and that's actually an objective reality. Like you are people, you're defined, you have a relationship that has components, but you have chosen to accept and to have each other, knowing the good and the bad, in sickness and in health, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, till death do us part, as the vows say. But any good relationship really defines that. And any good relationship that's healthy, there's the giving and receiving of truth in it. And we kind of don't like this so much a lot of times. And I think a lot of times as Christians, we're not super great at it for a reason we'll get into in just a moment. But any good relationship has the balance of grace. I accept you for who you are, and truth, which is there's some things that you may not see about yourself that you need to know. And Jesus did this constantly. Jesus loved people, he accepted people. Whenever anyone like in culture talks about Jesus, they love that about Jesus. But Jesus also loved people too much to leave them where they were. He said things like, neither do I condemn you. That's grace. But then he said what? Go and sin no more. That's truth. And so there's this, Jesus was both. And so really the idea is that grace, it provides the safety we need in our relationships. We all need grace, but truth provides the structure, and it actually is the thing that allows you to build something. The thing I love about my wife, Grace, she's known me for many, many years, and we've been married for 21. And she knows all of my worst. She's seen it, and she has chosen to love me anyway. But she also loves me too much to just say, oh, that's okay when you act like that. And that's where good productive conflict comes into play. So here's the thing. There's some relationships, maybe you who are watching this have one of these relationships, where grace and truth aren't working. And so you've tried grace. You said, I accept you. I love you. You did this thing. You said this thing, but I still love you. Let's go forward together. You've tried truth, which is saying, there's this thing that you should know about, and it hurts me when you do it. And it keeps happening, and it never gets resolved. And grace gets taken advantage of, and truth isn't listened to. And so maybe some of you have a relationship where that's going on, and the other person is expecting you to take one for the team every single time. And so that's where we come in with this idea of boundaries. And again, this is what this usually looks like. It usually looks like someone who will, when it comes to conflict, boundaries there's a lot of things we could talk forever about this. But it's when someone won't take responsibility for their feelings or the effects of their actions. So it's someone who, they get really angry and it spills all over the place and it causes all sorts of chaos and trauma, and they will not take responsibility for it.
They deflect it to the other person usually.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Like, you caused me to say and do this,
Look what you made me do.
Yeah, look what you made me do. And that's
the words of Taylor Swift. look what you made me do.
Yeah, it just totally deflects from the responsibility and what really is happening. Honestly, it's the truth factor. It deflects from the truth of what's actually happening.
Yeah, well, it creates a lie, and that's why they kind of. I have another banner for us.
Are you typing it in now?
Yeah, so we can do this on the scroll. But it's this. This big deal. You're responsible for your feelings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Full stop. What that doesn't mean you're responsible for what caused your feelings.
Right.
But you're responsible for your reaction and your response. And so it like, this is the thing you have control over. And sometimes in a relationship, you may not have control over some of that other stuff, but you do have some control over this one.
Mm.
Now, what I'm not saying is, it creates, that's perfect, Troy. It creates, I was trying to figure out what you were saying, but
Yeah.
I'm Layla Kerr.
isn't autocorrect great?
We got you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it creates an imbalance. And it's actually, one of the analogies I've used around grace and truth, it's like, it's like a balance beam.
Yeah.
And, if all the stuff is sliding in your direction, you're actually having to take responsibility for it. And if the other person's up here, everything is sliding away from them.
Mm.
And so that's an imbalanced relationship. And Daria,
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, you did a wonderful job of talking about what that means. But very often if you ever hear the words come out of your mouth, look what you made me do, or why do you make me this angry?
You make me angry. Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Be careful of that, because they might be responsible for the thing, but they're not responsible for your response to the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
You're still responsible for your own reaction.
Yeah. And there's a good exercise, if you can do nothing else in the moment, is to say, what is it about this that really gets under my skin? Like, why is that?
Yeah.
And that's usually a very good conversation. But so when grace and truth aren't working, it looks like that someone who won't take responsibility, or it's someone who comes sliding into your feelings and begins to manipulate or gaslight and say, you're crazy for feeling that way. Or they make you, here's one of the big keys of this. I don't know if you've ever had someone you're arguing with where you start to feel like you're questioning your own sanity. That's an excellent indicator that someone's trying to control or gaslight or manipulate the conversation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so both of those relationships are out of control. Someone whose stuff is just, it's spilling everywhere and is creating all these after effects. Or someone who's come into your yard and is messing around with your stuff that's yours. And those are out of control. And I think you said this, Daria, one of the ironic things is that some of the people in our lives who are the most out of control when it comes to them try to be controlling when it comes to you, or it comes to me.
Yes. Which is so toxic. It's so toxic, because then you end up in this like crazy whirlwind with them.
Well, but again, it's the boundaries thing. It's like it mixes up what is mine and what is theirs. It's like if a big storm came through and blew all like your patio furniture across into your neighbor's yard, you have to go sort out, like, is this mine? Is that theirs? How did it get here? And it's incredibly complex. But when it comes to controlling people, there's really a couple different kinds. And I know there's a lot of variation to this. There's people controlled by anger and people who control by guilt.
Yeah.
And anger basically is like, if you don't agree with me, or if you don't come over to my way of thinking, or if you don't, just own all of the stuff, I'm going to be angry at you.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people who yell usually, or the people who just, give you the silent treatment. But it's clear, like, you must conform to my point of view, or there's a price you're going to pay, full stop.
Mm.
And the other people it's kind of actually the same thing, but it's people who guilt trip. And it's, if you don't do it my way, I'll be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever encountered that in a relationship.
Oh, yes.
We have.
Yeah. A little more passive aggressive, but it's kind of the same thing. But here's what, I just kicked my light. But here's what both of those things are. Both of those things are actually a form of manipulation. Yeah. What they're doing is they're making you pay a price for being a free, autonomous adult who's allowed to have a perspective, who's allowed to have feelings, who's allowed to
have agency.
Yes, exactly. And so they're both saying, okay, yeah, if you want to do that, you can do that, but here's what it's going to cost you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
In a healthy relationship, that doesn't happen.
Right.
And so that's a key moment. If, like, you're like, man, the cost of being here is so much. That's a key moment that, like Troy said earlier, and like you said a few weeks ago, Daria, you have a relationship where there's an unhealthy power imbalance. Sometimes, like, we have kids, and they're definitely, we have more power than they do. And sometimes you're a boss and you have more power than the people who work for you, or whatever. There's relationships that naturally have that, but then there's these unhealthy imbalances And that's a perfect example of that. So really what a boundary is trying to do is it's trying to draw the lines again. It's trying to get their stuff back over on their side and your stuff over on your side, and get them back onto their property if they've left it, and try to keep you off their property, or them trying to drag you over to become responsible for their stuff. And so, guard your heart, that Proverbs 4 thing. Your heart's really a property line. And a boundary protects everything inside that. And if any of you want to go deeper with this, Henry Cloud has there's a whole book on this. It's great. And it has a Christian faith perspective in it as well. And so here's the thing. As we begin to draw these lines, here's what they are not. They are not punishment. When you make boundaries with a person, you're not punishing them, because that's manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're basically re-manipulating the situation in your favor. What it is it's a protective line. It's like if your neighbor has a crazy dog and they keep running onto your property, at some point someone's going to put a fence up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just to keep they have their dog. Their dog's great. It can bark, it can run around, but it's going to do it over there. And by the way, over there is where my neighbor lives. We joke a lot at Long Hill about my hand motions, because many of them.
I get it.
I try to stay in the frame. I try to
contrasting hand motions.
We got it.
But so whenever you do this, you have to start from a position of love. And if you cannot start from a position of love, you cannot do this in a healthy way. And so this has to be, I love this person. This person's really ticking me off. They're really out of control, or they're manipulating me. But this is a speaking the truth in love. This is what this really looks like, talking about the scriptures. And we have to start from that perspective. And here's one of the first ways that begins to look like. It's this. This is one of the first steps in setting boundaries, is you have to commit yourself to loving without rescuing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember what I said, boundaries is a big topic. It's people who abuse substances. It's people who are financial train wrecks. We're really talking about it when it comes to conflict.
I think it's important, too, that people realize that putting up boundaries is a loving way to even engage in the relationship. Yeah. Like, you can love someone and you can have boundaries. It's healthy to have boundaries, even if they don't like them. I think sometimes we take boundaries as a negative, maybe because, we had them when we were younger, like you were saying with the parent and child, and it's like, who wants boundaries? But in order to protect your well-being, just in general with relationships, boundaries are important. And we feel so guilty in culture today, I think, of having boundaries, because we feel bad when we can't solve all the things, right? Yeah. And we put ourselves in a position where we're not God, and they still need to go to God, and we still need to go to God. And so the rescuing is not for us. It's not our job. And I think sometimes we interject ourselves, or we think we're, saving the day. And it's not our position or our role.
Yeah, thank you for making that distinction, because that's a really good distinction. Boundaries aren't just like something you do when relationships are going badly. There's something all good relationships have. Just like, back to your neighbors and you like, if your neighbors and you have a good relationship, chances are excellent you have boundaries that are defined in your property, in your interpersonal relationships with what your kids do. It's all of the things. And so really what this is trying to bring things back from a point of chaos to a point of order. But any good relation, even I think this is controversial maybe for me to say this, even the best marriages have boundaries in them. And here's what I mean is, in a healthy marriage, the two people, yes, they become one, and we know the scriptures say that they become one flesh. But they also still are individuals. And so there's a shared life, but the best healthy marriage, at least as I've seen it in my, my ministry time, and even in our own relationship with my wife, Grace, is they're healthy individuals who choose to live life together and share life together. But there's parts that's like, okay, this is me and that is her, and she is responsible for that, and I'm responsible for this. And my wife and I are both introverts. I'm probably the more talkative of the two introverts, but one of the things we've discovered is there's just certain times and certain things where we need our time. We need to restore and recharge. And those are healthy boundaries, and a loving relationship respects those things. And so that's a great distinction. Thanks for making that distinction, that it's really not, you don't just do this when things are going bad. You do this because if it's going to be healthy, it's going to have them. And if they're over on your property, or their property's all over the place, or they're expecting you to come fix their stuff or take responsibility for 100% of the conflict, or if their emotional lack of control, that's just never going to go anywhere good.
Right.
There's nothing you can do to make that healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Will always be some form of dysfunctional, and it probably won't end well. It'll either be resentment or just bitterness or something. But loving without rescuing is basically opening yourself to the relationship, but like we've talked about in other weeks, not taking responsibility past your level of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key ways I think we do this a lot is we talked about a few weeks ago. There's, in any relationship, there's people who like to fight, and there's people who just want it to be over with and want to get away from it. It's like the fight or flight thing. And one of the most rescuing things that happens is the people who just want the conflict to be over rescue the other person's emotions by taking responsibility for things that they shouldn't be responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like love, but it's actually codependence. And so loving without rescuing is being present, but not being over responsible for. We were talking a few minutes before, and Andy or Daria, one of you said this: you can't save the conflict.
No.
Like, conflict is not something that you can save. It's something you both have to come to and resolve, but you cannot save a conflict.
No, it involves two people for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. You cannot. What you do is you actually create a power imbalance of your own.
Yes.
When you try to rescue a conflict that's beyond your point of responsibility.
Yeah, I liked your illustration of the seesaw. Now, if you're on that thing and two people are on it, and one moves more toward the middle, it's going to throw it off balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that works is if both people move to the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
we're assuming they weigh the same and all that, but
the same distance. That thing,
yeah, you never. It never works out unless both people do it together. And Amarilla's couple comments. She says, when you grow, you realize how important those boundaries were in your life. Yeah, isn't that interesting? How, like, when we're kids, we're just trying to get away from the boundaries, and then as adults, we realize, like, actually how
we need them.
I need more.
Yeah,
what boundaries are.
Give us all the boundaries.
Like, no, you can't stay up till 2 a.m. It just doesn't work. You have to go. It's like you have to create boundaries for yourself.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. Boundaries, when they're clearly defined, help 100% with expectations. Meaning, if you've said this is mine and that is yours, and the more those things are defined, the less unrealistic or unvalidated expectations show up in relationships.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, love without rescuing. Here's a tough one. Love by confronting lovingly.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what this means. This means a couple of different things. It means some of you love confronting, but not doing it in a loving way. And some of you hate confronting. So it's like, it's for the people who like to fight, and there's some people here who like to fight. I won't ask you to raise your hands.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning, how do I speak the truth in a non-threatening, non-damaging manner?
That's the thing. It's really the way we say things.
Yes.
And it's okay if we have to bring confrontation and we need to bring truth to somebody. And it sounds cliche. We always say, like, bring the truth in love. But really, the way you say it in your actions reflect that so much more. You can really bring the escalation of a conflict and fight down just in the way you communicate what you're trying to say.
Yes.
That truth can heal or it can wound.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's all in the way that it's presented, in the heart you have going into it. It could be a salve or a hammer.
That's really good, Andy. Really, really good. Yeah, and truth can, like you said, like, it can either be something that heals or it can be a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
it's basically the same way. And some of us are like, well, they just need to know the truth, and I'm going to tell them the truth, and they need to know, you know. And what that is really is you weaponizing the truth to do damage. And so confronting lovingly is how do I remove my emotions, my negative response, my reaction, my insecurity, my anger from the things I'm going to say. And how do I manage that on behalf of the other person in a way that they'll receive it? They have the best potential of receiving it well. And different people, they certainly do that differently.
Karen just wrote, a gentle answer turns away wrath.
Yes. I think one of the things that we mistake with that is really a gentle answer is still truth. It's not dodging out on the truth. I mean, I think one of the cliches most of us learned as kids is, you know, if we can't say nothing nice, we should say nothing at all. And that's sort of true, but sometimes the truth is not nice. Sometimes the truth is saying, you know, the way you're responding is really damaging our relationship, and it's hurtful, and it's painful, and we have to figure out a different way. And that's not nice. Nobody likes to hear that. Yeah, and let's see.
I'm really.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just okay. So unfortunately for some of us, when we are in that stage of confrontation, you are not feeling very loving. Really need to work with your feelings first. And that's true. And it's okay to take a step back to process your emotions. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually healthy boundary for yourself to know before you even go and say anything, to pray through it and think through it and process your emotions and your feelings, and then in a calmly fashion address it.
Yeah, and Bruce, I'll get to you in just a second. But that's actually that's a healthy boundary. It's saying to someone, look, we need to talk about this, and I want to talk about this, but if we do it now, it's not going to be good for our relationship. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to come back. I'm going to take a deep breath, 10 minutes, a couple hours, whatever it is, a good night's sleep. And if somehow by some miracle you can sleep after one of those, I sure can't. But it's saying, for the sake of our relationship, I'm going to establish a boundary here because I want us to do this well, because I care about you and I care about the relationship. But we need to resolve the issue. It's that whole "don't let the sun go down on your wrath." What that means is it means your anger it doesn't mean you have to do it in the calendar day. That's not what the Bible means when it says that. It means there has to be a time limit. There has to be an end point that gets established. Bruce is saying sometimes the other party wants to trigger your anger to justify the intensity of their own feelings and response. Yes. And that is prime boundary territory.
Yeah.
And being on guard.
It's emotional manipulation.
Yeah, that's when someone's coming onto your territory and manipulating your responses. And so that's time for boundary. And so lovely. That kind of leads us to into our next one a little bit, is when you have someone who's basically an arsonist like that, which is really what it is, someone who's throwing, a lit torch into the thing. And so you have to give consequences if necessary. And what that is, the way I wrote it in my notes is I said, sometimes you've got to move beyond saying no to doing no.
Yeah.
If saying no doesn't produce a healthy, appropriate response to the other person, no actually has to take on an active form. And really what that might be in a situation like what Bruce is saying is like, I'm not going to be spoken to in that manner. That's not respectful. It's not helpful. It's hurtful.
Yep.
And if that's how this is going to go, we are not going to continue to talk about this.
That's it.
Right.
For some of you, it's really just, it's placing a boundary that says, if you want to talk about this in a restorative, respectful, adult manner where we don't call names and we don't point fingers, I am totally down for that, because I do love you and I'm for the relationship, and I want, at the most, I just want this to be restored and made right. But if this is going to be manipulating and damaging and hurtful, then it's clear that's not what you want. And so we're not going to do this. And here's the thing: if you set those consequences, you've got to follow through with them.
Yeah.
This is real tricky in marriages and romantic relationships, especially. It's really tricky in codependent friendships. But somewhere where you feel bad for the person or they make you feel bad.
Yeah.
But again, remember the thing: you're responsible for your emotions. They're responsible for theirs. You're not responsible for theirs. If you're like, look how you made me feel, you didn't make them feel anything. They chose. If you weren't like abusive or hurtful, that's what you've got to ask yourself. But if you're healthy in this, and you're just setting a boundary and you're not letting them come onto your territory, or you're not going onto theirs and taking responsibility for their stuff, that's actually healthy. That's what healthy adults do.
Yeah.
That's what good neighbors do.
Good therapists even do that. We're not going to talk about that until we've talked about this.
And so the consequence is basically saying, look, I'm not going to fix like your neighbor. It's like, I'm sorry your pipes are busted, but that's really not my responsibility, and I'm not coming over again, and I'm not answering the phone. But then you've got to really stick with those things. And remember, here's the point. The point is not to just cut the other person off.
Right.
This is self-protective, but the door, if it's a mutual, respectable, non-toxic, non-manipulative meeting of the mind, so to speak, that's where reconciliation can happen. It's those other things, reconciliation cannot happen. Now, you can choose to forgive the other person, like we said a few weeks ago. You can set yourself free from the prison of it, and you can release them from responsibility. But reconciliation, which is where the relationship actually comes back together, can't happen unless both people want to come to it with open hearts and open minds, and be responsible and give and receive grace, but also give and receive truth. Yes, sometimes it would be a good time. It's always a good time to take time away. If it escalates and goes in a bad direction, one of the healthiest things you can do is say, time out. This is not going in a good direction for either of us. I want this to go in a better direction. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to our corners for whatever it is. But that's an extremely mature thing to do. If the other person won't do it, it really is a matter of saying, no, I need to do this for me. Again, you can't be responsible for them, but it is saying, we will come back to this. Here's how we're going to come back to this. But absolutely, whatever that looks like, whatever it takes to get clear, to have clear perspective. But I think also more importantly than that even is to wait out the cycle of your own emotions. Because anytime you get in conflict, your fight or flight, like squirrel brain response kicks in, and we can call it all sorts of things and cloak it in all sorts of sophistication, but that's really what it is. It's either it's attack or defend.
Right.
And neither of those are really great postures for healthy conflict. And so it's whatever it is, it's, getting away from that and waiting it out is a tremendously healthy thing to do. And something I think again, Christians struggle with this because it's like we know we're supposed to be peacemakers, and we are, but you can't make peace with somebody who doesn't want to make peace.
Right.
You're not Jesus, you're not God, and you cannot become God in your relationships. Only God can be God.
Yeah.
And otherwise it just doesn't work. And so it's really just it's the thing that changes for Christians how we interact in relationships is the source of our love and the source of our spiritual power, both of which are from Jesus. And also the supernatural intervention. And we've all experienced that in conflict where we've prayed and we've our stomach is tightened when we go in to talk to the person, and we've discovered that God has done a work in their heart.
Yeah.
And that's one of the amazing beauties of how God works and what he does. But that's really what this looks like. And boundaries, again, like you said earlier, Daria, it's not punitive, and it's not just what you do in conflict. It's what all healthy relationships have. And when it gets really messy, like things just seem like they're not getting better, and there's all this mix up, and it's running and it's ongoing and you're starting to feel frustrated and manipulated and resentful, it means there's a boundaries problem.
Right.
Yeah.
The way that ever gets restored is by figuring out where the lines are and getting everybody back within.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
It's really good.
So, hey, it's 9:40.
I was going to say, good way to close it out. We really appreciate you all commenting too. And even if you're not commenting, being here, this has been a really,
hanging out with us.
Tuesday nights has been a favorite for all of us. So we appreciate it. And the fact that you're transparent and vulnerable and honest in the conversation as well.
Yeah,
Tough
absolutely.
Topics, but good topics.
Yeah, these are not like the bunny rabbits and rainbows kinds of topics.
No, it's. But I think we're beyond that now. I think, we have to go after this deeper stuff because conflict in all of this does not ever go away. It's something you deal with for the rest of your life with people. That's just how relationships, go. Some are easier than others, but.
Yeah. And, I think for Jesus followers, and I think most, if not all of the folks who are here with us, that's who you are. We're called to show a better way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not just like in this abstract theological sense. It's in how we live. It's in how we love, and it's how we interact with other people.
Yes.
That's where Jesus is seen. He's seen in the nitty-gritty of life. And so when we go in with the power of God's Spirit, which we are guaranteed if you're a follower of Jesus, it's such good news. Because I wouldn't want my power. It's not very much. But you also go with a different toolbox that's informed by the redeemed way that we get to live in the kingdom of God as his people and as his ambassadors. That's a much better way to live. That's who that's who I hope I continue to become more like. We all have our good days and bad days, but that's who I hope our church becomes like. Our church becomes a place where people say, wow, they have the hard conversations, but they do it in such a life-giving, redemptive way. They're committed to each other. They're committed to loving like Jesus loved, even at great cost to themselves. Right. And they're committed. And here's the thing, committed to just a little snapshot of the kingdom of God here on earth.
Yeah.
We know it'll never be perfect here, but we can start to create that foretaste of what heaven will be like and how we live with each other. So we'll miss you guys this summer. We hope you have a great summer. We hope you do some awesome stuff.
We hope you rest. Get some rest.
Yeah. And
put boundaries into place if you need them.
Let me put a different banner up that doesn't say give consequences.
I was going to say, where's our connect card?
So as always, and this is ongoing, this isn't just at 9. It's something we do church-wide. If there's any way we can pray for you, serve you, do any, walk you through something, it is always our honor. We're thankful for the opportunity, and we're just thankful to be able to share life with you. And we look forward to picking this back up in September.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, Pastor Andy, you always have great last words and awesome prayers. And so, love for you to close us out.
Love you to butter me up to do that first. Let's pray. Yeah, Heavenly Father, I thank you for your Spirit. Thank you for the fact that we're not alone in anything that we do, especially the area of conflict. I pray you would, by your Spirit, fill our souls with love, that when we draw from it, especially in areas of conflict, that it would be love that comes up, that we'd know how to lovingly receive grace and truth and give grace and truth. That we'd be shining examples of what your kingdom looks like. Even in this world, on this earth. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great summer.
Yes, have a great summer. We'll totally miss you. Please come back in the fall, week after Labor Day. We'll be back, and we hope to see you refreshed, tanner than you've been, although we won't be able to see that. We will be.
You'll be able to see us.
All right. Have a great night and a great summer.
Everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.